Fears are mounting over a widening conflict in the Middle East. This after 2 deadly blasts today rocked a city in Iran. Iranian state media say 2 bombs in suitcases were remotely detonated near the tomb of General Qassem Soleimani. He is the former head of Iran's Quds Force and was assassinated by the U.S. in 2020. Today marks the 4th anniversary of his death. Mourners were gathered near his tomb when the bombs exploded. At least 95 people, including children, were killed, according to state media. Hundreds more were injured. So far, no one has claimed responsibility for the attack, but the Americans are adamant that they were not involved.
It's too early, at least for us, to be able to say what might have caused it. But I do want to address some of the irresponsible claims that I have seen circulate and say that, number one, the United States was not involved in any way, and any suggestion to the contrary is ridiculous. And number two, we have no reason to believe that Israel was involved in this explosion.
Dennis Horak previously served as head of Canada's mission to Iran and as ambassador to Saudi Arabia. He is in Toronto. Hello, sir. Welcome to the program.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So there are a lot of unanswered questions right now, but these blasts come at a particularly tense time in the Middle East. What's your assessment of what has happened in Iran today?
Well, first of all, I think it's a human tragedy to begin with. I think the last number I saw was 93 dead and many more injured, and that's horrible. In terms of the geopolitical situation in the Middle East, as you mentioned, it's very complicated. Any sort of violent situation, any sort of attack like this, obviously ratchets up some of the tension. I don't believe that Israel was involved in this attack. It doesn't seem like them. I think it's much more likely that it's either something internal in terms of some of the various separatist groups that are at times active in Iran, or also very likely ISIS or an ISIS offshoot. So that doesn't mean that Israel won't get blamed for it or that it won't be used to try and, again, ratchet up tensions against Israel, but it doesn't strike me as the kind of operation Israel would mount in Iran.
Well, Mr. Horak, how dangerous is this moment for the Middle East, especially with these twin blasts in Iran coming just 1 day after the alleged assassination of a senior Hamas official in Beirut yesterday?
It's a very tense time with everything that's going on in Gaza, and we've seen some border clashes in the northern border between Lebanon and Israel, actually more precisely between Hezbollah and Israel. And then you get the assassination of the Hamas official. It all raises tension and raises the risk of a broader escalation. I still think that's unlikely. I don't think either side really wants to ratchet it up. However, sometimes these events can take on a life of their own, so it's obviously a concern.
Okay, I want to follow up on something you said previously, which is that you believe Israel is not involved in these attacks. It's important to stress we have no information either way. No group has claimed responsibility. So on what grounds do you base your belief that Israel wasn't involved or may not have been involved?
Because I don't see really much of an objective here to punish people who are mourning Soleimani. Soleimani was a horrible person, and whether the people support him or not, they didn't deserve to get blown up. And I just don't see any particular objective the Israelis would have by blowing up mourners at this procession. There's no logic to it, and Israel does act logically. There are other entities, I think, that have carried out bombings like this in other parts of the region: Iraq, Syria, even Iran in certain cases. So I think it's much more likely to be internal, as I said, perhaps a separatist group or ISIS.
And from your vantage point, Mr. Horak, is it possible to stop this war between Israel and Hamas from widening even further than it already has, especially when you have the Iran-backed Houthis continuing to attack commercial vessels in the Red Sea, complicating matters even further?
It's tough, and I think a lot of parties on all sides are trying to sort of keep the lid on as much as possible. I don't think Hezbollah wants it to escalate into a full war with Lebanon, because I think that would hurt their position within Lebanon. I don't think Iran, in fact, wants to escalate it either, to the degree that perhaps they would become more directly involved. For Iran to have Hezbollah fire some missiles, or for Hezbollah to fire some missiles, seemingly ostensibly in support of the Palestinians, likewise with the Houthi, ostensibly in support of the Palestinians, raises their profile, raises their standing within certain circles, and I think that's as far as they really want to go. And that's something I think that at all sides and a lot of Arab partners would be pressing Hezbollah and others to try and make sure that a lid stays on this. And like I said, I don't think Iran has an appetite for a much wider war either.
So far, the Red Sea Security Force led by the United States is not deterring the Houthis, nor is it restoring confidence in the safety of using this vital trade route. How do you see security being restored to that particular region?
That's going to be tough. I mean, the Houthis have been, they've been in this civil war with the Saudis now since basically 2014, 2015. They've taken a pounding and have kept on going. They get support from Iran for, in terms of weapons and other kinds of support. So they're going to be hard to sort of push down. The Americans and the other members of the coalition may have to take more direct action. We saw earlier this week, I think it was, or around Christmas perhaps, the sinking of some fast boats, I think, that came in and were threatening commercial shipping and perhaps, I think, even American military vessels. So that sort of more kinetic kind of operation, we may see they may decide, the coalition may decide to try and hit Houthi targets within Yemen. That will be challenging as well and riskier, of course. And there then is a risk that this sort of fragile peace negotiations or peace talks between the Saudis and the Yemenis could be negatively impacted as well. So there's a lot of moving parts here. But at the end of the day, as I think the Americans and other members of the coalition have said, that the free transit of goods through the Red Sea, it's a very vital shipping transit point. So it needs to be restored. It needs to be secured. Otherwise, it's open season on the Gulf, for example, the Persian Gulf, or other areas where commercial shipping transits through. So it's a vital principle, I think, that needs to be enforced, but it's going to be tough.
Well, as you note, there are certainly risks associated with either course of action. Whatever it ends up being, we'll certainly watch to see how it develops. What are you watching for over the coming days, weeks, and months?
Basically, all of these things is to see how, first of all, how the war in Gaza changes, and I think it will change over the next few months, become perhaps a little bit more low intensity. But also watching the northern border of Israel, Lebanon border, to see if that ratchets up, to see if Hezbollah were to increase their missile attacks or various other sorts of attacks over the Lebanese border, and Israel responds, that could ratchet out. That could get out of control very quickly. But I think, as I said, I don't think either side wants that to happen, and Iran doesn't want that to happen. But these things can take on a life of their own, and it's very, very risky, all of these. And again, with the Red Sea, what happens in terms of how the international community responds, how the Houthis then respond to that. Do they then take it out, for example, on in retaliation? Perhaps they target Saudi Arabia or the UAE as they have in the past. And these sorts of things can spin out of control, particularly when you're dealing with actors like the Houthi, and to a similar degree, not exactly the same, with Hezbollah, who often are acting for various different reasons that really have nothing to do with advancing their own individual interests. So it's challenging.
Finally, Mr. Horak, I've got about 30 seconds. What can this country, what can Canada do to contribute to the stabilization of the situation?
We can talk to the Israelis, we can talk to the Lebanese to make sure that we try and express the need for restraint on both sides. I think that's important. In terms of the Red Sea, we are a junior member of the coalition. We sent, I believe, a couple of Canadian Forces personnel to help out, which is good. It may be a symbolic contribution, but that's important too, to show that there's broad international support, and to try and gain even more international support for that coalition, and to warn others who may want to complicate that situation, to make it harder for the coalition perhaps to be active. I'm thinking of Iran here, but perhaps some other rather nefarious actors. I think to caution them against intervening in what is, as I mentioned earlier, enforcing a matter of principle. It's important to the entire international community because the Red Sea is one aspect, but there are a lot of other choke points, a lot of other areas where this could happen as well. And that's not in anybody's interest, whether it's China, Russia, or whoever. So I think broadening that.
We have to leave it there. So Dennis Horak, I really want to thank you for your time. Dennis Horak previously served as the head of Canada's mission to Iran and as ambassador to Saudi Arabia. Really appreciate you being here.
My pleasure.